The small town of Elmshade had always been quiet, nestled between misty hills and dense forest. Its cobblestone streets echoed with the whispers of an older time, and every corner seemed to hold an untold story. But no tale was as whispered, as feared, as the one surrounding the old clockmaker's shop. The shop stood at the edge of town, its towering clock tower visible from miles away. Though its hands had long since stopped moving, the place held an uncanny allure. No one knew when the shop had been built, but the townsfolk claimed it was centuries old. Children dared each other to approach it, and even the boldest among them would retreat when they reached the shadow of its creaking sign. It was on one such cold, foggy evening that I arrived in Elmshade. A historian by trade, I had been chasing the legends of the Clockmaker for years, piecing together fragments of stories that spanned countries and centuries. Every tale spoke of an elusive craftsman who built clocks so precise they could command time itself. But those who acquired his work often vanished, leaving behind only the relentless ticking of their newfound clocks. The innkeeper, a stout woman with a wary gaze, had warned me not to go near the shop. "It's cursed," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling hearth. "No one who enters that place comes out the same." But I couldn't resist. The historian in me craved answers. That night, as the town slept and the fog rolled in thicker than ever, I made my way to the clockmaker's shop. The closer I got, the more oppressive the air became. The shop loomed ahead, its windows dark and foreboding. The door, adorned with intricate carvings of gears and cogs, seemed almost alive in the dim moonlight. With a deep breath, I pushed it open. Inside, the shop was a labyrinth of timepieces. Grandfather clocks lined the walls, their pendulums swaying in perfect harmony. Pocket watches hung from the ceiling, glinting like stars in the faint light of a single flickering lantern. The air was thick with the scent of wood polish and something metallic, like blood and rust. As I stepped further in, the door creaked shut behind me, and the sound of ticking grew deafening. It wasn't just one clock, it was all of them, ticking in unison, a chorus that seemed to resonate deep within my chest. At the heart of the room stood a workbench cluttered with tools, gears, and half-finished mechanisms. A journal lay open, its pages filled with incomprehensible diagrams and scrawled notes. Beside it sat a clock unlike any I had ever seen. Its face was translucent, revealing a network of gears that moved with an almost organic fluidity. I reached out to touch it, but before my fingers could make contact, a voice broke the silence. "Careful," it said, deep and melodic, yet tinged with an unsettling sharpness. "That one isn't ready." I spun around, my heart racing. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, gaunt man with piercing eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. His hands were stained with oil, and his long coat was frayed at the edges, as if time itself had worn it down. "You must be the clockmaker," I said, my voice barely audible over the incessant ticking. He smiled, a thin, humorless curve of his lips. "That's what they call me," he replied. "But names mean little here. The question is, why are you here?" I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "I've heard the stories," I said finally, "about your clocks, about what they can do." The clockmaker's smile faded. "Ah, stories," he said, his voice heavy with something I couldn't place. "They always forget to mention the cost." "The cost?" I asked, my voice trembling. The clockmaker gestured to the room around him. "Time is not something to be trifled with. My clocks are not mere machines. They are creations of precision, vessels for the unseen forces that govern existence. To touch time is to alter its flow, and every alteration demands a price." I felt a chill run down my spine. His words carried an undeniable weight, as if they were not a warning but a statement of inevitable truth. You mean the stories are real? I asked. You've built clocks that can manipulate time? He nodded slowly, his glowing eyes fixed on mine. The stories are real, but they are incomplete. People come seeking power, more time, a chance to fix their mistakes, a way to see the future, but they never understand what they're asking for. Time is not a gift, it's a burden. Every second you take must be paid for in kind. My curiosity overpowered my fear. And what happens to the ones who can't pay? The clockmaker turned to the translucent clock on his workbench, running his fingers over its intricate gears. They fade, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. They become part of the mechanism, their essence fueling the flow of time for others. That is the bargain they unknowingly make. I stared at the clock, the weight of his words sinking in. You mean they become trapped in your clocks? He met my gaze, and for the first time I saw something like sorrow in his eyes. Not just mine. All clocks are bound to the same laws. I merely build the vessels. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the relentless ticking. I glanced at the journal on his workbench, its pages covered in diagrams and notes I couldn't decipher. Among the sketches, one symbol stood out, a circle divided into segments, each marked with a name. My breath caught as I realized one of the names was mine. Why is my name here? I demanded, pointing at the journal. The clockmaker's expression darkened. Because you've already begun your bargain, he said. By stepping into this shop, you've entered the flow of time I've crafted. You sought answers, and now you must face the consequences. I backed away, my heart pounding. I didn't agree to anything. You didn't have to, he replied. Curiosity is the first thread, and once it's pulled, the rest unravels on its own. Panic surged through me. There must be a way to undo this, to stop the bargain. The clockmaker hesitated, his gaze flickering to the translucent clock. There is one way, he said, his voice low, but it is not without risk. Tell me, I insisted. He sighed and gestured for me to follow. He led me deeper into the shop, past rows of ticking clocks that seemed to watch us as we moved. At the very back of the room stood a massive clock, its face cracked and its hands frozen. Unlike the others, it was silent, exuding an aura of stillness that was almost suffocating. This is the heart of time, the clockmaker said. It is the source of all the clocks I've built. If you destroy it, the flow of time will reset, and the bargains tied to my creations will be undone. Then I'll do it, I said, stepping closer. He raised a hand, stopping me. It's not that simple. The heart is protected by the flow of time itself. To destroy it, you must enter its mechanism. Once inside, time will test you. If you fail, you will be lost forever. I swallowed hard, fear and determination battling within me. What kind of test? The clockmaker's expression grew grim. It will force you to confront your deepest regrets, your greatest fears, and the moments you wish you could change. If you falter, the heart will claim you. I stared at the massive clock, its cracked face reflecting my anxious expression. The thought of facing such trials was terrifying, but the alternative, being bound to the clockmaker's bargain, was far worse. I'll do it, I said, my voice steady despite the fear in my chest. Tell me what I have to do. The clockmaker nodded solemnly and handed me a small golden key. This will unlock the heart, he said. Once you're inside, the rest is up to you. With the golden key clutched tightly in my hand, I approached the heart of time. Its cracked face seemed to shimmer faintly, as though it were alive and waiting. My heart pounded as I slid the key into the lock at its base. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a resounding click, the entire clock shuddered, and the face began to glow. The room around me dissolved into darkness, replaced by a swirling vortex of light and shadow. I felt myself pulled forward, weightless and disoriented, until I landed abruptly on solid ground. I was no longer in the clockmaker shop. Instead, I stood in a vast, endless expanse filled with suspended gears and spinning cogs. Each gear was enormous, some as tall as buildings, their surfaces etched with scenes, moments frozen in time. As I moved closer to one, I realized the scene was familiar. It was a memory from my childhood, the day I'd broken my mother's favorite vase and lied about it. A voice echoed through the air, deep and resonant, yet strangely neutral. You have entered the heart of time. To destroy it, you must pass the trials, face your moments of truth, and make your choice. Before I could respond, the world shifted. I was no longer in the expanse of gears. I stood in my childhood home, the shattered vase at my feet. My younger self stared up at my mother, tears streaming down my face as I lied about what had happened. "This is where it begins," the voice said. "You lied to protect yourself, but your lie caused pain. Do you choose to confront the truth now?" My mother's voice, so vivid and real, echoed around me. "Just tell me the truth," she pleaded. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment as if it were happening for the first time. Then I stepped forward, speaking to the image of my younger self. "Tell her the truth," I said firmly. "It's better to face the consequences than to carry the guilt." As the words left my lips, the scene dissolved, and I was back in the expanse of gears. One of the giant cogs slowed its spinning, the etched scene fading into blankness. "You have passed the first trial," the voice intoned. "Two remain." The world shifted again. This time, I stood in a hospital room. My best friend lay in the bed, pale and weak, tubes and monitors surrounding them. I recognized the moment immediately. It was the day they had asked me to visit, but I hadn't gone. I'd been too consumed by work, too busy chasing my ambitions. "You chose ambition over friendship," the voice said. "Now you must decide. Will you stay and offer comfort, or leave as you did before?" Guilt tore through me. I approached the bed. My friend's face turned toward me, their eyes filled with unspoken sadness. This time, I didn't hesitate. "I'm here," I said, taking their hand. "I'm sorry I wasn't there before, but I'm here now." The scene dissolved once more, and another gear slowed, its surface wiped clean. "Two trials complete," the voice said. "One remains." The world shifted one final time. I stood at the edge of a dark void, my own reflection staring back at me. This trial was different. There were no scenes, no moments to revisit. Instead, the voice spoke directly to me. "Do you accept the choices you've made, the life you've lived, or do you wish to rewrite your past no matter the cost?" I hesitated, the enormity of the question pressing down on me. The temptation to change my regrets was overwhelming, but I realized something. My mistakes had shaped me. Without them, I wouldn't be the person I was now. "I accept my past," I said firmly. "I don't need to rewrite it. I only need to move forward." The void shattered, and I was back in the clockmaker shop. The heart of time stood before me, its glowing face cracked further, the light within it fading. The clockmaker appeared beside me, his expression unreadable. "You've done it," he said quietly. "The heart is undone, and the bargains tied to it are no more." The incessant ticking that had filled the shop was gone. The clocks around us were silent, their gears motionless. "What happens now?" I asked. The clockmaker's gaze softened, and for the first time I saw a hint of relief in his eyes. "Now you are free, and so am I." As he spoke, his form began to dissolve, turning into golden light that scattered like dust. The shop crumbled around me, the walls and clocks fading into nothingness. When the light finally dimmed, I found myself standing outside in the foggy streets of Elmshade. The clockmaker's shop was gone, leaving only an empty lot where it had stood. I held the golden key in my hand, its surface now dull and lifeless. Though the shop was gone, its memory remained etched in my mind, a reminder of the trials I had faced and the lessons I had learned. As I walked away, the first rays of dawn broke through the fog, illuminating the path ahead. I smiled, knowing I had faced time itself and emerged stronger. The curse of the Clockmaker was broken, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly free.